The first time the letter arrived, my wife thought it was a joke. A plain envelope, no return address, just the HOA's crest stamped in red at the corner. Inside was a notice written in stiff, officious language. Violation of HOA guidelines. Fine due, $3,500. The reason, apparently, was that she had left the shutters unpainted for 1 week too long after a storm had blown them loose. A week. We had been planning to repaint them that weekend. She had laughed, shaking her head. They must be crazy. $3,500 for shutters? They can take a hike. I remember her tossing the letter on the kitchen counter like it was junk mail. I tried to reason with her. Honey, you know how these HOA people are. They love their rules more than their own families. Maybe we should at least respond. But she was firm. No, I'm not paying that. It's absurd, and if we give in once, they'll keep coming back with more. I admired her spirit. She'd grown up in a family that didn't take nonsense from anyone, and that fire was part of what drew me to her. But as the days turned into weeks, the letters kept arriving, each one more threatening than the last. By the third notice, they were talking about further legal action. My wife still ignored them. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those quiet ones where the house smells like fresh coffee and sunlight pours through the windows, when everything came crashing down. We were in the living room, sipping our mugs, when the knock at the door came. 3 sharp raps, official and heavy. I opened it, and there they were, 2 police officers in uniform, standing on our porch. Behind them stood Karen. Everyone in the neighborhood called her HOA Karen. She was the self-appointed enforcer of everything from lawn length to mailbox paint, and she carried her clipboard like a weapon. Sir, we're here about an outstanding violation of your homeowners association, one officer said, his tone practiced. Before I could answer, Karen leaned in, her voice sharp. They've ignored every notice. This is criminal negligence. You need to do something, right now. My wife stepped forward. Excuse me, officers, but this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. The HOA doesn't get to call the police because they're mad about shutters. Karen's face turned red. You can't talk to me that way. You're breaking the rules. This neighborhood has standards. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, but the older one froze, his eyes locked on my wife. He took a step back, then blinked hard, as if he was seeing a ghost. Wait a second, he said slowly. Ma'am, you're Judge Ella Morris, aren't you? The air went still. Karen's mouth dropped open. My wife gave a small, almost tired smile. I am. Retired now, but yes. And you are? Officer Daniels, he stammered, his voice suddenly deferential. I appeared in your courtroom once, years ago. You presided over one of my cases when I was still a rookie. You gave me advice that stuck with me. Told me to always remember the law is meant to serve people, not power. His face flushed. I never forgot that. Karen sputtered, waving her clipboard. This is irrelevant. She broke the rules. She owes the HOA money and... But Daniels cut her off, his whole posture shifting. Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't a police matter. HOAs can issue civil fines, but they can't criminalize home maintenance. He turned to my wife. Judge, forgive me. We shouldn't even be here. The younger officer nodded, clearly relieved. Yeah, this doesn't fall under our jurisdiction. Karen's voice rose an octave. What? You can't just walk away. They're mocking our authority. My wife's calm was steady as stone. Authority doesn't mean anything when it isn't grounded in fairness. You can't bully people into submission just because you hold a clipboard, Karen. I'll never forget the look on Karen's face, like someone had pulled the rug out from under her carefully constructed tower of power. The officers gave us polite nods and left, leaving her standing there, speechless. For the first time since we'd moved into that neighborhood, she didn't have a comeback. You'd think that would have been the end of it, but with people like Karen, humiliation only breeds more spite. Over the next month, she tried everything, slipping letters under our door, whispering to neighbors about how entitled we were, even photographing our yard to send evidence to the HOA board. But something had shifted. Word spread quickly about what had happened with the officers. Neighbors who had quietly suffered under Karen's rule began to approach us. An older couple down the street confessed that they'd been fined $500 for hanging a bird feeder. A single mom admitted she'd been threatened with foreclosure for leaving a bicycle in her driveway overnight. One by one, people started sharing their stories. It turned out Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was exploiting them. She had manipulated the HOA into handing her more control than she was ever supposed to have. And people were scared to speak up because she had a way of turning the board against anyone who questioned her. My wife, being who she was, couldn't ignore it. She started gathering these stories, carefully documenting each one. She wasn't looking for revenge. She was looking for justice. I remember sitting with her at the dining table late into the night, papers spread out around us, her pen moving across legal pads in that neat, deliberate handwriting I'd seen in courtrooms. She wasn't a judge anymore, but that fire hadn't gone out. People like Karen thrive because others feel powerless, she said softly. But power is an illusion when it's built on fear. If the neighbors can come together, they can remind her that this community doesn't belong to one person. It wasn't easy. Some were hesitant, worried about retaliation. But little by little, more voices joined in. A retired veteran who'd been fined for flying his flag. A widow who'd been told her flower beds weren't uniform. Parents whose kids had been scolded for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. And so, one evening, in the community clubhouse that Karen had always claimed as her domain, more than 50 neighbors showed up. My wife stood at the front, not as a judge, not as someone seeking power, but as a neighbor. She laid out the facts, the abuse, the intimidation, the misuse of authority. Then she reminded them gently, but firmly, that they had the right to vote out board members, to rewrite bylaws, to take back their neighborhood. Karen tried to interrupt, of course, but the crowd wasn't with her anymore. Her voice was drowned out by the quiet strength of people who had finally found theirs. By the end of the night, the vote was unanimous. Karen was removed from her position. The HOA board was restructured, this time with people who actually lived by the values of community and fairness. Afterward, as the neighbors mingled, shaking hands and sharing relieved smiles, I looked at my wife. There she was in jeans and a sweater, sipping punch out of a paper cup, and yet I saw the same woman who had once commanded a courtroom with nothing but her voice and her integrity. On the way home, she slipped her hand into mine. You know, she said quietly, it was never about the shutters. It's never about the fine. It's about reminding people they don't have to accept injustice, no matter how small. And that was the lesson that lingered. Life has a way of testing you in the smallest of ways. An unfair fee, a bully with a clipboard, a rule that makes no sense. It's easy to shrug it off, to say it's not worth the fight. But sometimes, standing up in those little battles lights the way for others who are too tired, too scared, or too beaten down to fight for themselves. In the months that followed, the neighborhood changed. The bird feeder went back up. Kids played with sidewalk chalk again. Flags waved proudly. People planted gardens the way they wanted, painted shutters the colors they loved. And Karen? Well, she sold her house quietly a few months later and moved away. No one threw her a farewell party. No one missed her clipboard. My wife never gloated, never rubbed it in. She just went back to her morning coffee, her books, her walks with the dog. But every now and then, a neighbor would stop her in the street, thank her for what she'd done, and I could see the spark in her eyes. That was enough, because in the end, it wasn't just about shutters or fines or HOA rules. It was about dignity, fairness, and the quiet courage to say enough